Bad advice. Should I let my husband come home? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. This is a channel about narcissism and psychopathy, and time again, I see instances, just in day-to-day life or brought to my attention by you, my valuable viewers, of individuals who neither recognize nor understand narcissism. There are many instances of a dynamic between two people, often romantic or familial, sometimes in a social setting, sometimes between neighbors, where it is clear that it is the dynamic between a narcissist and a non-narcissist victim. The victim doesn't realize what they're dealing with, and the appropriate commentator is clueless as to what is occurring. I have seen this happen on so many occasions, particularly within the context of so-called agony aunts or relationship experts or dating gurus and so forth, who are presented with a set of facts which demonstrate that it is the narcissistic dynamic in action. They completely miss that's what's occurring and invariably go on to offer bad and sometimes dangerous advice. This offends me simply because of the failure to recognize narcissism in action, that the individuals who hold themselves out as experts are clearly failing. They may be somebody who is perfectly able to provide a useful explanation to help people in other instances, but not in relation to a toxic involvement with a narcissist. Time and time again, they miss this, and the consequences of doing so are serious. Thus, from time to time, I have written about and spoken about instances of bad advice in order to highlight this to you, to further your understanding, and also to encourage you to spread news about my work on the pages and the platforms of those that are giving this bad advice, with the intention that people will find themselves coming to the right information. That's part of the reason why I analyse this one's wife so much. Whilst I find her an entirely tedious individual, there are lots of people who are interested in her and her behaviour, and on many occasions I have been contacted by people who've stated, "I didn't realise that I was involved with a narcissist," or "I didn't realise that we had a narcissist in the family." And they didn't realise this until they watched the videos about this one's wife. Ordinarily, they'd have gone nowhere near videos about narcissism, but their interest in this one's wife led them to watch my work, and then they realised, not only do we know that she is a narcissist, but hang on a second, the behaviours that HG talks about, I see that in relation to my husband or wife or mother or brother, and therefore in the circumstances it serves such a useful vehicle for enabling people to understand what's actually going on. And the intermittent videos that I do with regard to bad advice seek to serve a similar purpose, to enable people to recognise where a narcissist is involved and to take the appropriate action, and to recognise those platforms where bad advice is being given. In this instance, one of my valuable viewers brought to my attention a YouTube show called the Dr. John Deloney Show. This platform is popular, it has several 100,000 subscribers, and the relevant video shows a slick studio setup. He has his YouTube plaque in the background, a couple of books that he's written, A World's Best Dad or such like, on display. And there's no doubt that this individual is well-intentioned with regard to his advice and has some degree of qualification in relation to advising people about relationship issues. Nevertheless, expert in narcissism he is not, and it shows. I'm going to summarize what takes place in the video for the purposes of avoiding what would otherwise be a rather long video. A female contacts the show to explain that she's having problems with her husband. She's noticeably upset, crying, sobbing, nervous, and anxious. We are able to ascertain the following from what she explains. Her husband repeatedly, and has done so for some time, flown into violent rages. Often, the source of the rage is completely mystifying to her. This suggests potential heated ignited fury. He repeatedly destroys property, or as she describes it, breaks everything in the house. That is an exhibition of heated ignited fury. It also shows an absence of emotional empathy for damaging the property. He shouts. This is a form of intimidation. He directs these rages and the destruction of property at his wife and also his 3 small children. The wife explains that the 3 small children are terrified. This exhibits a lack of emotional empathy for his family members. He also repeatedly walks out in the middle of conversations. This is the imposition of a present silent treatment and is the assertion of control, perhaps, by virtue of withdrawal. He repeatedly apologizes but then keeps on engaging in the same behavior, which suggests that this is false contrition. He accuses her of not caring about him, his emotions, or his feelings. That's blame shifting, the use of guilt, false accusations, and potentially a pity play also. Thus, there is a range of behaviours which have been happening repeatedly, and therefore it's evident that this individual is dealing with a narcissist. The behaviour has occurred over a sustained period of time. It demonstrates a sense of entitlement to behave this way, an absence of accountability for behaviours because he apologises but then keeps engaging in the same behaviour, an absence of emotional empathy for those affected. He's haughty and dismissive towards them. These are forms of manipulation in order to assert control over her because she's clearly threatening his control in some way. There's an absence of boundary recognition, for instance, with regard to smashing up the property. And he shows various aspects of the narcissistic dynamic. We learn that the victim has post-traumatic stress disorder. This originates from her father treating her in a way whereby he would ignore her, walking straight past her, making her feel belittled, making her feel like she didn't exist. As a consequence of these repeated behaviours and fearing for her safety, the wife has thrown the husband out. He, in order to get back in, has said that he'll get help and therefore wants to be allowed back to the home. The victim expresses her concern that all he'll do is attend for 2 weeks and then just continue with the abuse, suggesting this has happened in the past. She explains she wants to stop feeling like it's her fault. She does love him. She feels responsible for his anger and doesn't know how to make that feeling go away. Thus, what does this look like? Well, we are of course only hearing her side of the story and not that of the husband. But since we don't have his side of the story, then we proceed on the basis of determining, is what she's saying on the face of it plausible? It is. she comes across as genuine in relation to what she's explaining, and therefore one would treat what she has to say as being evidence of what has been happening. It's clear that his behaviours are abusive and dangerous. Furthermore, given the fact that they're repeated, sustained, and systematic, and for the reasons that I explained earlier, it's highly likely that she's dealing with a narcissist. Thirdly, it's evident that the victim is experiencing some form of addiction to this behaviour, as she feels responsible for it, feels unable to deal with it, and, as we know as a consequence of her history, it's likely that her father may well have been a narcissist and has conditioned her to this kind of behaviour, making her believe that it's her fault, so she then seeks to do something about it to try and resolve it by continuing to interact with the person that is abusing her. It is evident that she is at risk. Furthermore, the children are at risk. Accordingly, in these circumstances, what's the best course of action? Well, it would be for her to understand that she's dealing with a narcissist, for her to obey the first golden rule of freedom, which is once you know you go, you get out and stay out, so that she ensures that she doesn't let him back in, and that she takes steps to implement a no-contact regime. And then she undertakes work in relation to herself to understand why she is addicted to this behaviour and how she manages that addiction. That would be the appropriate plan of action for her in relation to these circumstances. Ensuring that she knows, 1, what she's dealing with, 2, what that means in terms of what she must do by way of a total no-contact regime, and 3, taking the steps to understand her own involvement in this vis-à-vis her addiction and why she feels compelled to continue to engage with such an individual, and to help her understand that she has nothing to feel guilty for, to aid her in making those feelings of responsibility to go away. That would be the main foundation of a 3-point plan to assist this lady. And then 1 would go into greater detail as to assisting her to submit a narc detector, talking to her about how she implements the no-contact regime, getting her to understand why he behaves the way he does, how he won't change, how he will continue to try and involve himself in her life if she lets that happen, and 3, how she can make those feelings go away in relation to her and why she feels that way in the first place. In a nutshell, that's what the advice would be for this individual who is evidently dealing with a narcissist. But what does this expert tell her? Well, he explains, after listening to her for a short while, that the husband is a gaslighting child with anger issues who is embarrassed by his outbursts, and that's why he blames them on her, to dump his own guilt over his bad behaviour. Wrong. First of all, he fails to suggest that he might be a narcissist. One appreciates that he might not be able to make an actual diagnosis based upon what's being told, but he could at least be suggesting that that's a possibility with all that flows from that. But instead, by calling him a child with anger issues, euphemizes the circumstances. And indeed, for a woman who engages in such caretaking for this person, that's exactly the wrong type of language to use with her, because it will probably make her feel sorry for him. Oh, he's just a child, he can't help what he does. He isn't embarrassed by his outbursts. He doesn't experience any embarrassment. He blames them on the wife, not because he's embarrassed or to dump his own guilt over his bad behaviour. He does it because his narcissism will not allow him to be accountable for his behaviours, because that threatens his need for control, and therefore it has to be suggested that it's somebody else's fault. Thus, it becomes the fault of the wife. The expert later states that it's not her fault. That's entirely correct. He explains that the husband leaves the conversation because he is struggling, that he gets flooded and overwhelmed with his emotions, and that's why he runs away from any discussion of his bad behaviour. Wrong. She, clearly trying to hold him to account in these conversations, threatens his need for control. He can no longer try and assert control over her directly in the conversation, so what he does is he walks off, thus withdrawing himself from her threats to control, giving him the subconscious sense of control, and he imposes a silent treatment in so doing. Thus, he's doing it for the purposes of control. Again, suggesting that he's flooded and overwhelmed with his emotions would be likely to cause this caretaking woman to feel sorry for him. The expert believes in the sincerity of the husband's apology, demonstrating how he's been completely hoodwinked because there is no sincerity in this apology. The conduct speaks for itself. He apologizes and then behaves badly. He apologizes, he behaves badly. Accordingly, it is entirely correct to deduce that the apology has no meaning whatsoever. The expert suggests that he needs to be sincere about saving the marriage. Well, there is no sincerity because she's dealing with a narcissist, and the last thing that she wants to be doing is to try and save the marriage because she needs to apply the principle of GOSO, to get out and stay out. The expert states that the husband does not care about his kids. He's correct about that. He states that he cares about his own ego, which in essence is correct, and doing what he wants to do when he wants to do it. Again, he's correct about that. But rather than explaining what all of that means in terms of him being a narcissist, he simply says, "I hate that for you," which of course doesn't provide any help to the woman whatsoever. When the wife explains that "I love him so much, but he doesn't believe that I care about him and his emotions and feelings," this expert states this is classic gaslighting. No, it's not. He clearly does not understand what gaslighting is. The expert states that she's all into the dynamic because of unfinished business with her father and is repeating old patterns. To some extent, that is accurate. She remains involved because she's been imprinted by her father's behaviour, which causes her to seek out the storm of a narcissist because it feels recognisable and comfortable to her because that's what she experienced as a child. The expert tells her, "Don't fight your feelings right now." He reinforces that it's not her fault. He then states, with bad advice, that she should send the narcissist, or undiagnosed one, an email telling him what needs to change. This is pointless. This is just keeping her interacting with somebody she should not be interacting with. She is trying to suggest to the narcissist that he ought to change. He is incapable of doing so, and this will just be a threat to control. The expert suggests that the husband has to attend professional licensed therapy 4 times before she lets him come back. Bad advice, complete waste of time. The expert says that the wife's body is telling her to run away, but she needs to lean past those feelings if the abuser leans towards her by going to 4 therapy sessions. Absolute nonsense. If he does go to the therapy sessions, he will simply use that as an opportunity to suggest that it's her fault and then to present to her as, "I've done my stint, let me back in." Or even, she may well have already let him back in on the proviso that he goes to these sessions, and they're not going to help whatsoever. Indeed, it's highly likely that he will continue to triangulate her with those therapy sessions. "I went and did my bit, I'm changing." Or, "The therapist said actually that I haven't done anything wrong and it's your fault." Commonly something that is used and done by the narcissist to use that therapy against the victim. The expert explains that things will get worse before they will get better, because there is a lot of hurt under that anger he has. Whilst there may be a degree of accuracy in that, this is completely meaningless in relation to the victim. The victim then agrees with that and defends her abuser, saying that he had childhood trauma, it's heartbreaking, but he's resistant to therapy because of his pride. No, he's resistant to therapy because his abusive behaviours are a pathologically entrenched self-defence mechanism. The expert states it's either he gets help or divorce him. In actual fact, help isn't going to do anything here, And the simple advice should be, get out of that relationship. Get your children out of that relationship. The expert says that she should talk to her girlfriends as she fights her feelings through the recommended 30-day separation. That is completely pointless and poor advice. Her friends aren't going to be able to offer her any meaningful insight, and all she is doing is continuing to engage with the narcissist by talking about him, which will keep her emotional thinking high and won't make her feel any better, and could cause her to be subjected to the influence of emotional thinking to take her husband back. He suggests that she talks to her therapist to help craft a 30-day plan. That if he goes to 4 sessions, she should take him back. He does warn her that the husband may walk away rather than change. Well, if so, good. Not recognising this would be the best outcome. The supposed expert states that he hopes the husband will respond to therapy and change. What is clear here is that poor advice, bad advice is being provided, and this is only going to keep the victim engaging with the narcissist and engaging in false hope that somehow there will be a change. She has been through this many times. She recognises that herself, and the advice is wrong for her and potentially dangerous, and is in effect advocating that so long as he undertakes 4 sessions of therapy, that she should take him back and work on the marriage. The clear advice here is that she is likely dealing with a narcissist. She needs to, 1, recognise that's what that is, and understand all that goes with that. 2, apply the principle of GOSO and implement a no-contact regimen. 3, understand what it is about her that has caused her to be drawn to this individual in the first place, and how she can manage that going forward. If you, or anybody that you know, needs the cold, forensic logic that I provide in order to help them understand what they're dealing with and to understand what they need to do, then you or them should organise an audio consultation with me. Details can be found in the video description to this particular video. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.